Hi, it's Louis Paul and the Colors of Prog. This is season 4, episode 28, Goblin. Talking about Goblin. I often do refer to them when discussing other bands or music, and I've done a few shows, podcast shows, over the last 4 years where I mentioned some Goblin material, but there's such a uh, soundtracks alone with such a huge amount of material. I don't do historically that much Goblin. So, but I picked on a thing to discuss today is the variations of Goblin, the different variant bands, especially with the news that the long and active members of Goblin, aside from Claudio Simonetti, who keeps working all the time, apparently, and keeps re-recording and re-releasing his versions with his current band of Goblin's music. He's calling his band Claudio Simonetti's Goblin, and he was an original member, so he's entitled. So anyway, the news that I was referring to was that bassist Fabio Pignatelli and drummer Agostino Marangello have decided to retire from live touring. Um, and this announcement came out on September 26th, which is fairly recent. Um, in that announcement, a decision was made by Maurizio Guarini, who's the keyboard player of Goblin, the Roller album, and he's been in and out of the band for years. And the original drummer, Walter Martino, he left after Profondo Rosso Deep Red, but popped in and out on some of the soundtrack work. And with the new members of the band, an augmented Goblin would tour Europe with dates to be announced in Europe first, and hopefully we'll get to see this version of Goblin in the US. It'd be interesting to see and hear another variant of Goblin aside from Simonetti's. It's all kind of odd as I've been listening to the various lineups of the band recently, and I decided to do this show. After the Non Ho Sono or Sleepless soundtrack in 2001, that was the Argento film that they scored, and Guarini appeared as a member of Goblin and not Simonetti. It was 5 long years until Back to the Goblin, and it was released in 2005. Massimo Morante on guitars, Fabio Pignatelli on bass, Guarini on keyboards, and Agostino on drums. Back to the Goblin is their first non-soundtrack album since 1982's Volo, or to be charitable, 1978's Il Fantastico Viaggi del Vigoroso Mark in 1978. That was the really weird Goblin album, the 1978 studio work, almost Kafka influence, Metamorphosis, and it had vocals, which is a very rare thing. And Volo was, which came out in 1982, also had vocals, but those recordings were done much earlier. Back to the Goblin features 8 all-new studio tracks and with Fabio's punchy, distinctive Rickenbacker bass sound forefront. I mean, this thing was mixed bass heavy. It's Goblin updated for the new millennium, and even track 6 features some kind of vocal. I'm not sure what's going on there, but it's buried deep in the mix. And I'm not even sure what they were saying. So it possibly could have been a chant. So 10 years later, Four of a Kind appears, and that's that one. And it's the same lineup as Back to the Goblin, but it seems to be a reinvigorated band here. More of Fabio's crazy thick Rickenbacker bass. I always thought that Fabio Pignatelli, next to Chris Squire of Yes, was one of the most expressive bass players in music. I mean, you just have to listen to those early uh, works they did on those Argento films, the soundtracks like Suspiria, Deep Red, Profondo Rosso, and uh, many more. And it's just and the Roller album, which is fantastic. There's just that big, thick Rickenbacker bass. It's crazy stuff. The opening tune, Uneven Time, even has some lovely sax work. That's a new thing for Goblin. The sax playing is by Antonio Marangello, the drummer's son. And otherwise, it's all instrumental mostly. Goblin fans should check out Four of a Kind. Oddly enough, when this first came out on CD, the the disc had like a slipcase. I wish I could show it to you, but when I have an image behind me, it blurs the image I'm showing you. With four player cards, fake player cards, like player cards and you know, poker, that kind of thing. Yeah, those kind of player cards. Um, and while we're at it, they also hit the live performance road during the 2000s. So, you know, they came out with Back to the Goblin, they came out with Four of a Kind, and they decided to hit the road. But then there were different lineups at this point. So we had New Goblin. Yes, that one about my shoulder. And New Goblin Live in Rome was released in 2012 and included Massimo Morante on guitars, Claudio Simonetti, and Maurizio Guarini on keyboards, so the both of them. And the bass and drum sets were augmented by Simonetti's Demonia band members, Bruno Previtali on bass and Tito Tani on drums. And they were playing with Simonetti in Demonia, which is a side project of his, or a project of his aside from Goblin at the time. So they kind of jumped in there. And the show was recorded at the Alpheus in Rome in February 2011. So they quickly put this out. And the new Goblin hits all the sweet spots in the Goblin repertoire, but something seems amiss. Far better. Well, before I go further, when I say something seems amiss, it's like the audience is into them, of course, and the band sounds good, no doubt there. But what I thought was interesting is that the band sounds good, but they don't sound. I don't know how many dates they did, or maybe they didn't rehearse enough. So the new Goblin, live in Rome, is a good recording to have. It's well done. It's a two CD set, but with liner notes, which is nice to have. And this was self-released on the Radio Rock label in Italy. So you might find this, you might not, you might have a way, but if that's portion of the album CD cover, so much better is Goblin Ostinato live in Austin, Texas. Yes. Um, it's from a 2014 gig. It's only 10 years back. I know. Morante Pignatelli on bass, Marangello on drums, and Guarini on keyboards, and American session player Steve Moore are on additional keyboards. So they kind of like when they toured, they would throw in an additional keyboard players. So like when they had Simonetti and Guarini on Live in Rome, 2 years later they're playing the States, and this Steve Moore fellow, well, he's fine. It's only the third time Goblin toured the States, which is true. And it seems like it was a club show in Austin, Texas, as opposed to an arena. But yeah, I guess, that band would play clubs or smallish theaters. Uh, But the audience is so enthusiastic on the live in Texas. There you go. There you go. And so enthusiastic because it's like they probably waited all their lives to see Goblin, and they're finally seeing Goblin. And it's when you have an appreciative audience like that, the show's going to be good. It's a good show. Also, I'm not sure who's speaking, but I think it's the guitarist and the bass player, and is speaking to the audience, introducing songs, playing with the audience a little bit. So it's also, I have to say, a first for me because I never thought Goblin would be that much a vocal a band interacting with their audience. So it's a great show. Their set list is a highlight of their soundtrack catalog. Um, and as I said, fan appreciation was very high. And if you want a live Goblin concert in your collection, I highly recommend this one. Now, here's the thing. This was released in 2016 by Back to the Fudder. Yes, I know. And separately, this is a 2 CD set, by the way. Um, Separately, a DVD was released of this performance, visual thing. They didn't package the CD with the DVD. I noticed it went out of print and then it came back into the print. And then it went out of print and it came back into print. So I happen to have found it, of all places, on Amazon for a very good price. So basically, that's it. Different versions of Goblin, different variants of the band, and later in their career, obviously 2005 to 2014. And I'd recommend them all. New Goblin Live in Rome, a little less so because it's while good, it's not a great live representation of the band, and you're missing that great bass player as well. Anyway, that's our show for today. So it's like different kind of Goblin thing. Thanks for watching.